Good evening. I'm Jennifer Maddox. I'm the coordinator of the Kentucky Great Writers Series. And this series features authors who either live or have lived in Kentucky and have one or more literary works of high quality. Um, Before we begin our readings, I'd like to introduce you to what's coming up at the Carnegie Center and let you know what you can expect tonight. Now, one of the things we're excited to announce is the Carnegie Center's virtual Books in Progress conference will be taking place June 4th through 6th, and our keynote speaker is the award-winning poet Ada Limon. So that should be a wonderful event. We're also accepting applications into the Carnegie Center Author Academy, which will begin this fall. And then now through the end of summer, at least the end of summer, you'll find nearly all Carnegie Center events online. And after that point, we're actually going to do some things online still. But in the meantime, you can find Carnegie Center writing workshops, mentoring, the new Kentucky Black Writers Collaborative, and much more. And you can learn about these things on carnegiecenterlex.org. Tonight's reading event is sponsored by the Reitzel Cook Foundation, the Kentucky Arts Council, Lex Arts, WUKY, and we like to give a special thanks to Nate's Coffee. If we were in the building, we would all be enjoying their coffee tonight. Now, we encourage all of you all to support our Kentucky authors that we are featuring. And one way you can do it is by buying their books. So tonight we have a couple of our writers on staff who are going to be putting in the links in the chat window where you can buy those books. And if you're listening, that exact link is www.bookshop.org/shop/Carnegie Center. And one of the great things about Bookshop is at no additional cost to you, a portion of your purchase will go to the Carnegie Center and a portion of it will go to local independent bookstores. So everybody wins. Now, this event is being recorded and it'll be available on the Carnegie Center's Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And then it'll later be rebroadcast on the radio at WKY station 91.3 FM in Lexington. Now I'd like to give one special final announcement before we get into our author readings tonight. I would like to say a big congratulations to author and poet Crystal Wilkinson. She is the 2021-2022 Kentucky Poet Laureate. And some of you know this, some of you may not. She is a former Carnegie Center staff person. She wrote Blackberries in our building. She's very special to all of us. She's also an award-winning poet and author, and she is currently on the faculty of the University of Kentucky's MFA in Creative Writing program. Now, if you're wanting to watch this program, it's going to be virtual this year. So the induction ceremony for the Kentucky Poet Laureate will be on Friday at 10 a.m. on the Kentucky Arts Council's Facebook page and their YouTube page. So you definitely don't want to miss that. And now we'll begin our readings. And if you're just tuning in tonight, I'm Jennifer Maddox. I coordinate the Kentucky Great Writers Series, and I'd like to welcome you to our very special Poetry Powerhouse edition. It's become a tradition for us at the Carnegie Center so that we can celebrate National Poetry Month. Now, speaking of Kentucky's Poet Laureate, later tonight, we're going to hear from the current Poet Laureate, Jeff Worley, and he's going to tell us about his very unusual pandemic era term. But before we do that, we're going to first hear from Katarina Stoykova. So Katerina, if you will unmute and turn on your camera, we would love to welcome you here tonight. There she is.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here.
Hi, Katerina. And, one of the things that, makes you unusual tonight is that you divide your time between Bulgaria and Kentucky. Where are you now?
Right now, I am downtown Kentucky. Very happy to be so. Last year, I did not travel at all, and this year, I, stayed for the longest time ever in one place.
Well, we're so glad you're here. We always miss you when you're gone. We love that you come back every time.
Very happy to be in Kentucky.
Well, for those of you all who are watching tonight and listening at home, if you don't know Katerina, let me tell you a little bit about her. I first met Katerina several years ago when she visited the Carnegie Center soon after her first poetry collection came out called The Air Around the Butterfly. And that was actually the first time I'd ever seen a poetry book that had the poem in two languages, Bulgarian and in English. And it's an absolutely gorgeous collection. And, one of the things I remember about that first visit is, just how nice and friendly Katerina was and how she had this very beautifully accented English. And, at that time, I had no idea what a powerhouse she was going to be. She for years has, first of all, she's the founder of Accents Publishing, and she's also for years been the host of Accents radio show on WRFL, and that's at 88.1 FM in Lexington. And, both of these have helped launch the literary careers for a lot of writers and also draw attention to Kentucky's talented poets and writers, and also, talented poets and writers from around the country and even around the world. So this has been a very powerful source for writers. And in addition to authoring several poetry books of her own, she edited the anthology Bigger Than They Appear, and her poems have appeared in numerous publications, both in the US and abroad. Now, she's also an actor and a screenwriter, and her film Proud Citizen received several film festival awards. And Katerina teaches Carnegie Center classes in poetry, publication, and several other topics, and she's also been a mentor in the Carnegie Center Author Academy. Her most recent book is Second Skin, and whether she'll read from that tonight or share some new poems, we'll soon find out. But I'm going to turn this over to Katerina, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you so much to the Carnegie Center and to everyone who had anything to do with making this event possible and spreading the word. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in to listen. I feel honored and excited to share my poems with you and to read with Hannah Drake and Jeff Worley. I'll read to you from my latest book, Second Skin, as Jen said, which first came out in Bulgarian in 2018 and in English in 2019. It is an autobiographical book about growing up in domestic violence and the lasting effects from such upbringing. It's not exactly a joyful topic, but it's important to discuss openly, and that's what this book is doing. So I'll just share a few poems from this book. Eighth-floor balcony gazelle. If I catch you smoking, I'll throw you off the balcony. If something happens to you, I'll jump off the balcony. Dad stopped hitting me. Go ahead, he laughed. Scream for help. Then opened the door to the balcony. To free space in the kitchen, we moved the stove to the balcony. Dad got mad and started dragging Mom towards the balcony. You could see the sun rise out of the Black Sea from the balcony. When the guests for Mom's funeral arrived, Dad hid, smoking on the balcony. I hated him in the house as well as on the balcony. I've been faking all my orgasms, I confessed to my first ex-husband on the balcony. I stared out for a month, waiting for my pen pal to arrive as I was scrubbing the windows on the balcony. Your marriage will last at most 3 years, Dad told me on the balcony. When I was leaving for America, I looked up from the cab and saw my best friend waving from the balcony. I am ready to let go of everything that happened, except the balcony. Katerina, there is no heaven or hell. There is just this balcony. And I think I counted, the word balcony is mentioned about 30 times in this book. A lot happens on this balcony. Mommy, Mommy, how we would run away from home whenever Dad kicked us out or it got too dangerous How I wanted to protect you, how we scurried together, almost folded in half, how we cowered in the attics of nearby high-rises, and then at Grandma's for a while, or at your friend Zhenia's with Natashka and Christo, until things calmed down, until Dad started apologizing, and you began reciting justifications and allowances, because other than that, he really loves us. And because other than that, he works hard and gives up his entire salary and doesn't run around. There are men who constantly cheat. Do you know how bad that is? I don't know, Mommy. Yet again, I dismissed the person next to me and I'm still alone. Welcome, moment you look into a mirror and on its frame you notice 7 roses painted. At least 5 of them look open, as if screaming in horror. Their mouths have teeth. How disturbed do you have to be to see this? Your second ex-husband said, "You're damaged," and you agreed. 2 of the roses resemble regular flowers, although one of them has its head hanging downwards. Now I'll read you a poem in 2 languages. First in English and then in Bulgarian. Conversation. Daddy, why is your face so sad? Because your mommy died, baby. Why do you visit the grave every day, Daddy? Baby, she is there every day. Daddy, your pillow is bitter with salt. Is that a question, baby? Разговор. Татенце, защо ти е тъжно лицето? Защото майка ти почина, катенце. Защо ходиш всеки ден на гроба, татенце? Катенце, тя всеки ден е там. Татенце, възглавницата ти горчи от сол. Това въпрос ли е, катенце? Once she got mud on her shoes and never wore them again. Many times when she was little, her father hit her. So when she left home, she never called him again. Well, almost. Called every week, but loving him was difficult. I have 2 more poems to read. This next one is after a famous poem by poet Cesar Vallejo, and that famous poem is called Black Stone Over White Stone, and this one also is called Black Stone Over White Stone. And Burgas is my hometown. I will die in Burgas under the pouring rain that falls once a year or 2 whenever I can visit. I will die on the 8th floor balcony at sunrise as the sky tugs the sun's soul out of the Black Sea shimmer. It will be a Friday, as it is today, because as I write these lines, I notice how the work week ends and how I crawl into another pile unfinished business. Katerina died during her visit. Whoever is returning to Kentucky, isn't she, believe me, determined to remain unnoticed? This person mirrors her disappearing foreign bones completely. The only witnesses remain the balcony, the rain, the constant resurrections. Um, I'm an immigrant. I came in the United States in 1995, and the first 20 or so years, I thought a lot about what home is. And uh, the next and last one that I'm going to read to you today is answer this question for me. We must be very careful when using the word home. At home, at our apartments, 2 kilometers on foot from the cemetery and our mother's rectangles. At home, where it's tragic and filled with our own existence. At home, we can find honey, mint tea, know everyone's secrets. At home, we suspect our neighbors. We do not spit in the elevator. We receive letters. We may be in love or may not be. That doesn't matter. We are, and love is. At home, there is an old reddish chair on which we wrote our first poem. At home, every object is owned by an emotion. Time has stopped as if everything were waiting to see us. At home, that means we've been needed. At home, a record number of ghosts. One dresses our wounds, another a salad. Third asks about living abroad. He also wants to see where his happiness lies. There is more. We only have to pull open a drawer. We take items out, put them back, close. Stairs from ourselves we've climbed, for which there is no space where we live, but we can still keep at home. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Katerina, for sharing those words with us. Very moving. And next, I have Hannah L. Drake, who's going to be joining me on the screen. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Now, I'm sitting in Bourbon County today. Where are you located right now?
I'm in Louisville.
In Louisville.
Mhm.
One of the great things about having virtual events is that we can be all experiencing the same thing, but yet be in different places. And that's something that, I think that this pandemic has definitely helped us with, is being able to do that. And, you know, um, to the audience, I'd like to say that tonight, before we started started the event, Hannah and I were talking about the news. And I just want to read this headline that I read today. Jury finds Derek Chauvin guilty of murder in George Floyd verdict. Now, words are so powerful. Those words invoked a lot of emotions in my heart. And I know that they have for so many people who are watching tonight. And I am not a poet. I don't have the power of words the way that Hannah does with this. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. But I do want to tell you about Hannah. Now, she and I actually met for the first time tonight, just before this event started. Um, but I've been watching some of her YouTube performances of her poems, and let me tell you, this girl is a powerhouse. She's a poet, author, activist, public speaker, and we're really excited to welcome her to the Kentucky Great Writers Series for the first time. And I can tell you from watching those performances that she will move you and she will definitely get you to think and to see things from a perspective that might be different from your own. Um, Hannah is one of the strong voices in Louisville who was speaking out after Breonna Taylor's death. And one of Hannah's poems, All You Had to Do Was Play the Game Boy, which addresses the protest by Colin Kaepernick, has been viewed over 2 million times. Through writing and her online platform, she speaks of justice and of making a way through the obstacles and barriers. And her poem Spaces won a Best of the Best of Louisville, Kentucky award, um, among others that she's received. Her commentaries on politics, feminism, and race have been featured in a variety of sources, and she's also been on the Tom Joyner show, morning show with Jackie Reed. And her work has attracted the attention of former First Lady Michelle Obama. Hannah says, my sole purpose in writing and speaking is not that I entertain you. I am trying to shake a nation. Among her recent publications is a book of poetry, prose, and passion called Love, Revolution, and Lemonade, which includes some of the poems that I've mentioned here tonight. And I'm going to let Hannah take it from here. I give you Hannah L. Drake.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer. This is Love, Revolution, and Lemonade. This is my copy. So, of course, it's a little tattered. You know how we do. It's writers and readers. So this is my copy for sure. So I will just start. And I have forgotten, or maybe I didn't know how much time I have. So when I'm done, or I need to stop, Jennifer, if you say, okay, Hannah, we're done, that would that would be great. And so, of course, to start, I will read a poem that I wrote actually for, I heard Mike Brown. Mike Brown, of course, was killed in Ferguson, Missouri, and I heard his mother on TV, and they asked her, when did she think of her son? And she said, every time that it rains, I think of him. And so immediately I remembered that, and I wrote a poem called Ain't I a Mother, which I performed with the Louisville Ballet. And so in light of what has happened today, I will certainly read that poem, and then Spaces, and then I think I'll read Dawn, and then I think that will probably be my time. So this piece is called Ain't I a Mother? There ain't a day that goes by that I don't think of him, especially when the rain falls. He loved the rain, said God was making everything new. I wonder if he's there in the clouds, in the dew. Does he see me? Can he hear me? Sometimes I hear his voice on the wind, see a smile in the face of a child, fragments of him scattered in memories. I'm clutching for anything to make sense. Who picks up the pieces of a soul that has been shattered? Will I ever feel whole again? You see, I just want to feel normal. They said this would get easier, that time would soothe the pain, yet life hasn't given me a moment to grieve, and ain't I a mother? Ain't I got a right to hurt? He was my only child, and I got a right to cry. And I got a right to weep for grandchildren that I will never know. And I got a right to my sorrow. My son was a good kid, but good Black boys scream from the grave daily, and every day I hear him wailing among the willows. As I watch the sun set just beneath the horizon, I listen, hoping for a new day that never seems to come. You didn't see him. You never saw him. His beauty, his heart, his compassion. How many shots did it take? What were his last words? Was anyone there to hold his hand? Was he cold? How long did it take for him to die? Did he ask for me? You see, I said I would always be there to ease his pain, bandage his wounds, tell him that it's going to be okay, but this time it won't be okay. I promised I would protect him, I would cover him, and now you want me to understand when you say that you are sorry. Did you notice that his blood was red like yours? That his heart beat like yours, that he had dreams just like your little boy? I told him that he would push beyond barriers. I told him that he would carry the weight of the world in his hands. I longed to rewind time, see him again, tell him this world will be a better place. Tell him that this world says it's sorry. Tell him that one day his skin won't be his sentence. Tell him that one day he will soar, that one day he would chase the stars, that one day he would change the world. that one day this world would embrace him, that one day he would stretch his arms out and fly. Tell him that one day this world would just let him be. But you see, rewinding time is gone. My life is nothing now but grasping for second chances. Where do I go from here? Where do we go from here? When are we going to pull back the mask? When are we going to face the truth? When are we going to talk to each other? My son didn't die so that we would be quiet. You see, people don't die so that we can be whispers. I declare that I will not be silenced any longer. I will no longer be invisible. I hear you, son, and I vow to be your shout among crowds of willows. You see, my son's death will not be in vain. I am the voice of my ancestors, of generations. I am the voice of old Negro spirituals. I am the shoulders that carry the weight of suffering. I am the heart of a mother. So no longer do we wait. No longer do I wait. Today, we speak, we shout, and we yell, vowing that the blood that wells, crying out, rustling through the wind, will be heard. And that is Ain't I a Mother for Mike Brown, but certainly can be applied to many, many, many people that have found themselves facing some form of police brutality or death. And so I wrote that for Mike Brown. And the next piece I will do what's called Spaces. I will tell you all real quickly, I wrote this and I didn't tell anybody why I wrote this poem for a long time, but then I told everybody. So I was asked to perform at the Speed Museum. And the Speed Museum knows this story. So I'm gonna let y'all in on a little secret. So I was asked to perform at the Speed Museum, and I was with a group of about 10 performance artists, and we were all Black, and the Speed was having a community day, and everybody was white. So no one looked like me at all. And we were very concerned about, oh, well, we don't want to say anything to offend somebody. And then we decided this is what we do, and this is the type of work we put out. And so we're just going to do whatever. And so I went to perform, and in the audience, I saw two little Black girls with these huge afros, and may have been about 7 or 8. And they were looking at me so intensely. And it dawned on me in that moment that that's why I'm in this space. That's why I'm here. Even if I feel uncomfortable, I'm here to be a space maker for these two little girls. And so I came home that night and I wrote this poem, Spaces, because of what happened to me at the Speed Museum. It has become my most requested poem that I've ever written. I certainly didn't know that was going to happen, but I think anybody can relate to it because at some point we've all felt as if we didn't belong somewhere. So the poem is called Spaces. It is difficult to stand in spaces, spaces that weren't designed for me, spaces that were not created for people that look like me, spaces that scream, you do not belong here, spaces that feel like sandpaper against my Blackness, coarse and rough and painful and uneasy, spaces that are void of signs, but still I can see them hanging in a not so distant memory, signs that separated water fountains and restaurants, blatantly reminding people that these spaces were not made for them. And although the signs no longer remain, the architecture and atmosphere is constructed in such a way that I know and we know that these are not our spaces. We are simply standing in borrowed time to entertain the master's masses. It is difficult to stand in these spaces and be me, fully me. Code switching my vernacular to make you feel comfortable. Why must my life dress itself up in discomfort for you to feel at ease? Why must my hair look a certain way in these spaces? Why is my gender an issue in these spaces? Why does my skin feel so heavy in these spaces? You see, these are spaces I no longer want to reside in. I do not enjoy being in these spaces. I no longer want to subject myself to these spaces, but then I am reminded as I stand in these spaces and I see the faces of these two little Black girls watching me perform in awe, because I'm a woman with kinky hair like them and skin that looks like theirs and lips that look like theirs, standing in these spaces. Spaces that have been designed in ways that are spoken to them at an early age, reminding them, baby, some spaces just ain't for your kind. You see that? It's why I'm in these spaces, being a shout in these spaces. It is for every Black person that has ever entered a room and wondered, would anyone look like them in these spaces? It is for every LGBTQ person that has wondered, could they safely be themselves in these spaces? It is for every woman that has stood at the head of a boardroom table wondering, would she be considered equal in these spaces? It is for every Muslim woman that has wondered, could she wear her hijab in these spaces? You see, I remember those that stood in spaces not made for them, that marched on roads not paved for them, that sat down on seats in buses not earmarked for them, that sat down at counters and endured the humiliation of sitting in spaces so that one day I too could stand in these spaces. You see, that is why I'm in these spaces. It is for everyone that came before me, that sipped water at the colored only fountain, that marched into integrated schools and knew they would be just one of nine. It is for every Black performer that stood on stages so that one day little Black kids could know that they too could stand on stages. It is for my mother that stood in the space of a cotton field, picking cotton for 80 cents a day. It is for everyone that will come after me, for them to know that they have a right to be in these spaces, to have a seat at the table in these spaces, to have a voice in these spaces, to have influence in these spaces. You see that? It's why I stand in these spaces, even when it makes me uncomfortable. And now some of you sit looking at me, and now you feel uncomfortable. But today you have heard me. You cannot unsee me. In this space, I belong. In this space, we are here, and we belong here in this space. Thank you. I don't know if still more time or not, Jennifer.
You know, I didn't even check the time. We do about 10 minutes. So I was just so enraptured by what you were saying. I didn't even look at the time. So, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was very powerful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, Jeff Worley is a different kind of powerhouse. If poets had superpowers, his would be humor. And he doesn't always let you see that humor right away. He doesn't even let you see it all the time. Sometimes he just holds it close to him like a secret. And it might come out, you know, not until the next poem. But Jeff is no stranger to publication. He's published 6 books, 4 chapbooks, edited the poetry anthology, What Comes Down to Us, and his poems have appeared in over 500 literary journals and magazines. Let that sink in. 500. He's the winner of the Kentucky Book of the Year Award from the Southern Kentucky Book Fest. He's won 3 Al Smith Fellowships from the Kentucky Arts Council. He's won a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. He also was a Pulitzer Prize nominee, and he's had many other awards and honors. He's also taught in several different states and even in Europe before finally settling in Kentucky and eventually retiring from the University of Kentucky in 2010. Now, he often teaches poetry at the Carnegie Center. So if you want to learn from this guy, there's definitely an opportunity to do that. And he's also been a mentor in the Carnegie Center Author Academy as well. Now, with Jeff's experiences, successes, and skill as a poet and writer, it's no surprise that Jeff was selected as the 2019 Kentucky Poet Laureate. His most recent poetry collection is titled Lucky Talk. And if you haven't seen the cover of that book, I'm just as breathless looking at the cover as I am when I read that poem that's actually based on that. I don't know if you say this name Eunice or Eunice, but Eunice Winkless's Dive into a Pool of Water. That's definitely a poem that you must read. And so Jeff is joining us now. So Jeff, I wanted to ask you, you've been Kentucky's Poet Laureate for 2 years now. Is this your last reading as Poet Laureate?
This is it.
This is it.
My swan song.
Well, we're so honored that you will do this reading with us tonight. And, I know that some of your friends have asked you this really crazy question, and I'm really curious to hear the answer myself. The question they've asked is, do you feel cheated out of your second year of being Poet Laureate because of severe COVID limitations? So I'm going to let Jeff answer that question, talk to us about his term as Kentucky Poet Laureate, and then read to us from some of his poems. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jen. I want to tell you that you're still one of our favorite neighbors.
Well,
So
thank
thank you. I think, well, it's a reasonable question. It's a good question, but with the state of things, I think it's all relative. You could say that because of the pandemic, um, I didn't do many, no live appearances in the last year, and very little compared to my first 10 months. But it is all relative. 6,400 Kentuckians, because of COVID, have been cheated out of continuing their lives. So that's way more important than anything that's happened to me. First, I want to thank the Carnegie Center for inviting me to read a few poems. It's a delight to read with Katerina and Hannah. It's good to hear you both. Before I read a few poems, though, I'd like to do a brief report that focuses on the privilege and joy to present the state's wonderful writers for the time that I had to do this. I'm honored. It's a great opportunity. And I want to say the first 10 months were wonderfully busy. In Kentucky, for example, I read at universities, colleges, libraries, civic groups, book fairs. I judged poetry competitions and was interviewed a number of times. Thank you, Katerina, for WRFL's interview, which was the first one. And I was thinking about at Campbellsville University. It was fun to be there and meet some of the faculty. And the assistant professor who was kind of squiring me around the campus told me that this was a pretty good. She asked, "Was this a pretty good crowd?" And I said, "Well, yeah. It looks like this is the largest crowd I've had. There must have been 120 people there." And she paused for a couple of seconds and she said, "Well, they got chapel credit for being there." And I thought, well, that's really interesting. It's got a faintly ironic if they know my work at all. But it was a joy to be in all of these places in Kentucky. Outside of Kentucky, I was invited by the Ohio Arts Council to be one of the judges for the next Poet Laureate of Ohio. Very interesting, experience. And I was invited to Texas A&M. And the way this happened is that an old friend of mine from Lexington, Hunter Hayes, is now English department chair of one of the Texas A&M universities. This is how these things work. You know somebody, and they invite you to come if their department has money. This sort of thing. That's just the way I think it's probably always worked. That was a very, very pleasant, interesting experience. The most surprising, I have to say, was to Washington, D.C. The EU ambassador to the United States invited me to come and be a part of a celebration of Kentucky. And I'll just read you the first part of the email that I got, and this is from his uh, senior advisor, Maeve Beard, said, Dear Jeff, I am contacting you on behalf of the EU ambassador to the US, Stavros Lambridis, who is hosting an event at his residence in DC to celebrate Kentucky and its historic ongoing ties with Europe. From research, I see you are currently serving as poet laureate, and you were editor of an anthology of Kentucky poetry called What Comes Down to Us, which Jen mentioned. The ambassador believes in the power of poetry and thinks it has an important place in diplomatic work. So I get this email, and I had to think really long and hard about whether I would do this or not, like about a second and a half. And so I was really glad to do this. By the way, here's the book. It's called 25 Contemporary Kentucky Poets, What Comes Down to Us, University Press of Kentucky. Copies are still available. So that's how you work a book plug into this. So there we were, Linda and I went, and the night of this gathering, we were early to the ambassador's residence. Apparently it's called Ambassador's Row in Washington, D.C. We were early, so we decided to take a little walk around the neighborhood. And we went in one direction, and a couple of guys in kind of shark skin suits jumped out of nowhere and said, you can't walk this way. So we walked the other way and had a little stroll for a while. When we did get into the ambassador's residence, he did want to meet us. He took us up to the second floor where we could look over his grounds, swimming pool, and so forth. And I said, you should know, Ambassador, that you're well protected here in this house, because Linda and I couldn't even walk down the street. And he said, oh, well, it's not about me. The Obamas live 2 houses away. So that was really just a wonderful trip and totally unexpected. One other highlight was working with Ava Zadrzinska, who started a series called Poetry Unites. She did Poetry Unites New York, Poetry Unites Kansas, and their most recent documentary of hers is Poetry Unites Kentucky. And the way this works is that the 4 people who were chosen, this was based on an essay contest, and there were several judges for this, Hannah Drake being one of them, to pick the most interesting, compelling essays about a poem that has changed their life. And then the 4 ended up being in the documentary, and that has been completed. It's aired on KET, and I understand it's pretty easy to find. So please do see that. A lot of work went into that from Ava. Okay, a few poems, which I'm always glad to read. My wife, Linda, 15 years ago, treated us by buying us a cabin at Cave Run Lake. And I soon discovered that when I was out there, poems just jumped out of the woods at me. Here's one of them. It's called Ode to a Sharp-Shinned Hawk. Against our cabin window, a softball, a hurled mud clod. I ease a bookmark into my quiet life and go outside. Below the window, a package of feathers, short rounded wings spread as if trying to reach some great new height. Then the wings relax, rest, after a life of rowing insatiable hunger through currents of air. I bring him in. I want a closer look. He is warm in my palm, the mosaic of the brown mottled breast shining under kitchen light. The yellow talons stiffen. If I'm not careful, the yellow tinged beak will draw my blood even now. I don't know what wren, titmouse, nuthatch bouncing at our bird feeder lured him here. I don't know how many field mice, rabbits rushing for underbrush, robins posting their first love songs, gasp their last breath, embraced by these talons. But I do know his sleek wings feel like velvet. His eyes shine like orange opal, and I can't get them to close. Here's another one that I would have never written if we had gotten this cabin out at Cave Run. This is titled Porch Swing, Cave Run Lake, 2:30 a.m. This must be the quiet, the dead here. Though just yesterday I read that Weeping Pines Mortuary in Los Angeles will rig up a stereo system in their poshest lacquered coffin for a stiff price. The music is piped in via two-way front speakers, four mid-bass drivers, divine tweeters, and a custom 8-inch subwoofer, which is what Mrs. Harriet Kosolov did for her husband, who all his life couldn't get enough of Mozart's Canzone Solaria, the lilting sway of soprano. Now it's on a continuous loop in Frederick's final resting place. I should be happy for him, his music to die for, the notes cascading around him like fat droplets from a magic waterfall. But instead, I think of his neighbor one plot over, a man named Patty Greer, victim of a random drive-by. Turn it down, he says. Turn it down. God damn it, I'm trying to sleep. And here's another one. This one is titled Waiting for Deer. And there's an epigraph here from my good friend and former poet laureate, Richard Taylor, who says in one of his poems, I feel a tingling that begins in the wrist and spreads with the joy of them. Waiting for deer. When they come, circumspect as they need to be, the metal feeder is there for them, two payoff slots of easy bounty. I am the quiet watcher, my only motion moving these words across the page. Two does, their pelts this time of year the color of deep smoke. They bend to the rice bran, corn, protein mix, then look my direction. Something not quite right in the shadows, but perhaps harmless. I wish they knew how beautiful they are in their sleek coats, prehensile tongues now swiping up the pellets. I knew a man once who hoped for this closeness so he could drag a deer home. Not here. But they are suddenly spooked by our neighbor's chainsaw grinding the air. The deer pause, eye each other, and bend again to the ground where, always in the moment, they find a little more to go on. And I'll end with a Lexington poem uh, titled Reality Check. Some of you are going to understand the reference here to a place called Drake's. Reality check. Heather, the new bartender at Drake's, has exactly 14 ballpoint pens perfectly aligned in her holster. Her eyes are green almonds. Her smile reaches into my chest and turns my heart 35 years counterclockwise. Your eyes, she says, are they hazel? Light brown? I hope it's okay to say they're beautiful in this light. Her words hug the air for 3 long seconds. You know, you remind me of my grandfather. Words can do such wonderful work. Sometimes we don't know when to stop. Thank you all for being out there somewhere and listening. And again, to the Carnegie Center, thanks much.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for ending us with a laugh. As always, it was a pleasure to hear you read. That was Jeff Worley. In case you all tuned in just a moment ago, Jeff Worley, thank you. And also thank you to Katarina Stoykova and Hannah L. Drake for your readings just a few minutes ago. One of the things that I noticed about these readings at first, a lot of heavy topics, abuse, death, being scared, lives shattered, love as a mother, love as a child for your father. But then also, some of those same things show up in Jeff's work as well, but with a lighter touch. Even the Mozart themed afterlife, and that death and the reality check, and just the different perspectives and the power of poetry, the power of words, using some of those same words in different ways can give us such a different meaning. And that's why poets put so much emphasis on the importance of a single word. I'm not a poet, but I admire all of you for the work that you're able to do. We're getting ready to start our audience questions. So if I could have Hannah and Katerina join us on their videos. We've got a couple of wonderful questions from our audience. I've got one or two myself prepared, but if anybody in the audience wants to submit a question, now is the time. So I'll start with the first question, which is for all three of you. How do you edit your drafts, and how do you know when to stop editing?
I actually wrote a piece called "How Do I Know a Poem is Finished?"
Perfect.
But I will typically I'll read it out loud, and I know if I need to insert another word or take something out because I'm trying to say too much in one line, or there's a better word choice for that. And it sounds silly to say, so I'm curious what the other poets will say. I think your gut just knows this poem is done. And at some point, I tell a lot of writers this, at some point you have to birth the baby. It's over. It's over. Let it go. You wrote it, it's finished. Yeah.
I love that. Jeff or Katerina, you have an answer?
Yeah. I like the quote by Paul Valéry, who says somewhere that poems are never finished, only abandoned. That rings true to me. But to answer the question more directly, one of the best things that happened for my poetry when I moved to Lexington was being part of a poetry group that included some really terrific poets, Richard Taylor, Letha Kendrick, Mike Moran, and others. And it's typical workshop. We'd bring in a draft of a poem, hand out copies to people, and basically we, read the poem out loud, and then the others would talk about what they thought worked, what they thought didn't, and why. And that group has been incredibly important for me. And I suggest that all writers who want to improve their work, no matter if it's poetry, fiction, or something else, find like-minded people, or relatively like-minded people, who can read your work and help you improve it. And of course, that's what we do in Carnegie Center poetry classes.
Absolutely.
I have my own answer too about how do I know if a poem is finished. I need to be able to answer does it say what I wanted to say in the way that I want to say it? So in order to be able to do that, I need to make it a point to stay connected for the reason for the poem. I stay connected with why did I want to write this poem in first place? And that is kind of like my North Star, to not escape too far from it and not to over edit it and create a zombie poem, you know, a poem that acts like a poem, looks like a poem, but it's nothing like what uh, what I wanted to say.
Very good answer. Our next question is for Hannah. This is from someone who says, as a Black spoken word artist and writer, how do I occupy spaces with my poetry?
Well, I'm just a person that's just gonna write it how I feel it and speak the truth. And I tell people it's okay to be afraid, because many of these topics are, for some people, uncomfortable topics, but write it afraid, right? And show up afraid. And it's okay if your knees are knocking, still show up in the space and read your work and own it. Own what it is that you have to say. And I think as a writer, I've already drawn my line in the sand. So I've already decided I'm going to say the tough things and let the chips fall where they may. Oftentimes I'll write something and I am afraid to put it out to the world because I know what's going to come back to me. But I've already made the decision that it's worth it for me to stand up and speak the truth. So I think you make a decision and go for it.
Great, thank you.
Own what you have to say. That's really, really nice.
Mhm. Mhm. Now, and this might be, and this is for all three of you all, and it might go with some of the things we've talked about earlier too, is who were some of your mentors along the road to publication, and how did they impact your life?
I'd be glad to try to answer that. There, of course, poetry teachers that I had at Wichita State, Michael Van Walligen, who's a wonderful poet, and Bruce Cutler, who invented the MFA program, and Stephen Dunn. We've been friends for a long time, and he's been an incredible role model for me, inspiration. And a lot of the poets that I've gained from, that I've learned from, I have their books here on the shelves, and I could start naming them, but we don't have that much time probably. But I think your mentors can also be writers that you read and have never met.
I can say a few words about that. I have been writing since I was 8 years old, and kind of like since I was 10, I started joining writers groups, and I think that every one of my mentors and my peers have been essential on my path to publication. Georgi Borisov is my first, nobody has probably heard about this poet, but he was my first editor and the publisher of my first 2 books published in Bulgarian. Also, everybody from the Poesia poetry group in Lexington, Kentucky. Many people have heard about it. It started in 2007, February 2007, and hundreds of people have gone through this group, and we have studied together. We have learned from each other. And also I have to say that everybody who has been on my radio show, Accents, has been a mentor to me, because I interview people who I want to learn from, and I ask questions that I want to know the answer to. And I ask everybody who teaches, what is the most important thing you teach your students? And I remember Jeff's answer, which was get out of town. Get out of town and learn something, you know. And so that you can, write better. So that's my answer.
I think that's great advice. I remember the first time I went to New York to the New Eurekan Poetry Cafe. I thought, oh my goodness, who are these people? I was completely amazed. They were reciting poetry in a way that I had never heard and certainly wasn't writing. And it completely opened up a new door for me in my mind when it came to writing. So certainly get out of town. And I mean, it's much easier now online. You can see almost anyone right on your computer. But for me, just quickly, I remember watching the inauguration when I was much younger and saw Maya Angelou. I didn't even know at the time that that was Maya Angelou. I just heard her reading on the Pulse of the Morning. And I thought, who is that? And whatever it is she's doing, that's what I want to do. I knew it immediately. And then, of course, I found out that that was Maya Angelou. I absolutely love Nikki Finney. And this is the advice Nikki Finney told me. You're good, but you ain't that good. And, and she was right.
We probably all need to hear that nowadays, you know?
And then I read Head Off and Split, which was phenomenal. And she is correct. I'm good, but I ain't that good. And so, but it takes someone like that, you know, iron sharpens iron, or people will challenge you. Because when you're in a bubble and you think like, oh, I'm this great writer in your circle, and you may be, but then as you were saying, you step out of that and you're opened up to a whole nother world. And so I appreciated years ago that Nikki told me that.
Oh, love Nikki, but whoo, she does tell the truth, doesn't she? Oh, but you know, one of the things too that I've heard you all say is find writers groups, find other people who can give feedback. And of course, you know, some people are like, where do I find that? You know, we definitely have some stuff like that at the Carnegie Center. That some of you all might be from Louisville. There's Louisville Literary Arts. And then, of course, you know, anytime that there is a public reading, especially when we're back in person, but even when it's virtual, start attending these things. You're going to meet people in the audience, you know, in person, and you're going to learn some things from the people that you hear virtually that are going to help you. Because I know that every time that I hear some of you all read, I learn something about writing and about what is working. And then I look at my stuff and know what's not working. And, you know, so it's very important. So thank you all for sharing, you know, your powerful, powerful poetry. That's why we call this the, you know, the Poetry Powerhouse Edition. And you all have, you know, every single one of you have, you know, shown it tonight. And so the last question I'd like to ask you as we're leaving tonight is, where can people go to find out more about you?
Oh, my website hasn't been updated since 2015. So right now I'm thinking, I don't know how to answer that question. I guess Facebook would be a good place to find out more information about me, Goodreads. And really, if anybody goes on the Accents website, they can see what I've been putting my time and energy in, and that's really enough. That's really enough about me.
People can find me on my website. It's hannahLdrake.com. And of course, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. My handle is Hannah Drake 628. So that's where people can find more of my work on YouTube or online.
To find out a whole lot more about me, start with this really thick FBI file. You know, if you can find that, because there's really some amazing stuff in there. Oh, never mind. I have a website, jeff-worley.com, and there's more on that website than anybody should ever have to know about me. But all of my books are for sale through the website, but not through PayPal, which is the way I set it up. PayPal could not ever get it together to alert me when somebody bought one of my books. So I have a little note at the top of that page that said, just send me a check, you know, and here's my address in Lexington. Drop by my house. You know, I've got books here, and they're not doing anything but just gathering dust. So be glad to sell them to you.
One of the things I love about Kentucky writers, you all are always so accessible for people to come up and talk to you, or like Jeff says, here's my address, stop by and buy a book. I just love it. And I love all of you. So thank you all so much for your wonderful readings tonight. To our audience, please, please, please go to the bookshop website, go buy these books by these authors. You will not regret it. Thanks again to our featured readers. Thank you to our audience. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. So
Thank you,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jeff and
thank
Hannah.
you.